All right, so moving on to lesson 2 from unit 0. And we're going to be able to fit page 1 and page 2 onto this video, and then I have to do a part 2 for the rest of the pages. So we're going to cover a warm-up here, decimals, fractions, integers, that kind of thing. And then we're going to move on to percentages. So I believe. Yeah. Okay. So lesson number 2, warm up. Circle the numerator of the fraction. Number 1, the numerator is a 4. Denominator is 11. The denominator for number 2 is 17. Write the fraction 1/10 as a decimal and in word form. Well, I just said 1/10. So you're going to see me put the 0 in front just to emphasize the fact that the decimal's on that side. So that's 1/10. Circle all the integers. That's an integer, that's an integer, that's an integer. So the integers run kind of that way from 0 and that way from 0. So fraction, decimal, kind of in the way the fact that they have whole number parts, fraction parts, whole number parts, fraction parts. Integers do not have those parts. They only have the whole number parts, okay, and include 0. All right, so, oops, look at the, I don't think the numbering came out very well. Kind of started numbering all over again. So this one here that says number 1 is write the decimal 0.13 as a fraction. Let's see, ends up in the hundredths. So this is 13 hundredths. Make sure you get that THS on the end. So 13 hundredths. Okay. Write the mixed number 15 1/4 in decimal form and word form. So what did I just say? 15. Wow, that's barely legible. I apologize. 15 and probably need the decimal form. Let's see. 15 and 25 hundredths. Okay, so I got the 0.25 from the 1 divided by 4 using a calculator. You can just do that, right? You can do it by hand. 4 into 1. Let's see, that'd be 2 because that's 8. That's 2. Bring down another 0 would be 20, which would be 5. So 0.25, okay? Or just put 1 divided by 4 equals 0.25. That's showing your work, okay? Equations always work, even if you're using the calculator. All right, 1 to the thousands. Let's see, thousands with no TH on the end, that's there. So because that's an 8, I got to round that up. So that one's weird. That one's 30,000. That's how you do that one. All right, here's the same number again, only to the thousandths, which is right there. So this is 29,875 and 231 thousandths. Drop the 4 off the end. All right, let's see, calculator, 125 divided by 8, that comes out to 15.625, 31 divided by 2 in the calculator, 15.5, that's clearly a larger number. I think that would be the easiest way to go. You can do longhand if you want to. Again, to show work, 125 divided by 8 gets you that number. 31 divided by 2 gets you that number. Okay? All right, absolute value of a -9 is a +9. Opposite of 9 is a -9, so clearly that one's greater. So the 9 is greater than -9. Okay. Right is a mixed number. So whole number part, decimal part. Well, that was really easy. Write as a decimal. Oh, write this decimal as a fraction. That should say probably mixed number. That should say mixed number. And in word form, so this is 123 and 31 thousandths. Okay. Yeah, that's a mixed number, not a fraction. I'll write that down over here. Mixed number. All right, thank you. Moving on. All right, page 2. Students will be able to represent a number as a decimal, a percent, and a fraction. Be able to solve an unknown percent problem. Solve percent applications. All right. So the important part is percents are used all the time. You're at a store, something's on sale, you want to figure out how much you're going to have to pay for it. You pay a percent in taxes out of your paycheck. If you earn commission, you earn a percentage commission. Interest rates when you're buying a car or getting a loan. These are often communicating relative amounts. A percent is a ratio of a number and 100. Percent means per 100. How many out of 100 is what we're talking about. If there was 100, how many would this be out of the 100? And you use the percent symbol after the number to indicate it is a percent. Okay? So, percent to fraction is what we're doing first. Write the whole number as the numerator of the fraction and make the denominator 100. Well, that sounds really easy. So, 25% is really 25 out of 100. So, you write the number over 100. Done. That's percent to fraction. All right. Says simplify the fractions by dividing the numerator and the denominator by a common factor. Okay, so 25 out of 100 is not a finished answer because it's divisible. So let's see. This says 5 out of 20 is also 25%. So you can reduce. So since it says percent or per 100, we are writing the number over 100. But then rules say that you have to reduce any fractions that are reducible. So both of these numbers, 5 can go into both of these numbers. So we reduce that fraction down to here. But then you have to keep going because 1 out of 4 is also 25%. So you need to take another 5 out. Oops. Sorry. And that gives you 1 over 4, which is what this one is. So you can either take 5 and then another 5, or you can take 2 5s, which is a 25. So you can do 25 divided by 25 is 1, 100 divided by 25 is 4. But you'll have to reduce the fraction. It doesn't matter to me whether it takes you 2 steps to get there or 1, as long as whatever you're left with is completely reduced. So even though 25% is 25 out of 100, we also would call that as a fraction a 1/4 or a quarter, because that's what 25 over 100 reduced is. All right, and then we also need to go fraction back to decimal and decimal to percent. So let's see. It says divide the numerator by 100, moves the decimal 2 places to the left for a decimal. Multiply by 100 moves the decimal. Multiply versus divide. Okay, so let's look at that. So if I have 25 divided by 100, right, that fraction, 25 divided by 100, gives me the decimal for it. So that's the fraction turned into a decimal. Then when you multiply 100 by it, you get the percent back. Okay, so we're going percent to fraction, and then we're going fraction back to percent. So some people just move the decimal. If it's the 2 decimal places, kind of 2 hops. If you see the number 25, that means the decimal's here. So you go 1, 2, moves it back that way. That is the same thing as dividing it by 100. Okay, so if you have, let's say, 100%, the decimal's here, 1, 2 gets it back. If you have 100% of something, you have a whole 1, right? If you have twice as much as that, that's 200%. 1 and a fractional part, again, 135 moving 2 decimals, that's the decimal. 135% is less than 200%, but more than 100%. So you can have a decimal point. I want to say there's some of these on the test, so be careful with this. If you were given, let's say 225 to turn into a percent, go back the other way. So 1, 2, 2.25 turns into 225% because you have 2 holes. 2 holes. 1 hole is 100, is a 1. 2 holes is 200. So if you have 2.25, that's more, right? So 2.25. I'm writing this down on my other thing here. So make sure you can go back the other way too, okay? So that's why it's like multiply versus divide, so be careful with that. Obviously, I need some practice on this, so let's keep going. All right, so write 37% as a fraction. Well, you really should move it 2 decimal places this way or divide it by 100, right? 37% is 37 over 100. Put that in your calculator. 35 divided by 100 moves that decimal place to the front. Okay, once it's moved to the front, that 7 ends up in the hundredths place. So that's what it is as a fraction. Okay, I kind of showed some work there. All right, number 2. Write the decimal 0.53 as a fraction. So that'd be 5. You would say 53 hundredths. Okay, and then write it as a percent. So if it's 53 hundredths, then it's 53% because percents are that out of 100. So some people know that 0.53, they go 1, 2, and they go right to that percent. But then it's kind of hard to put it from there back to a fraction. So make sure, I don't care about the order you do them in. You have to be able to turn them into fractions and percentages. Okay, so I don't have a lot of work shown here. I mean, if you're my student, I take the little swoopy things even as work. Okay, because some people are good at that. Some people like me don't know their right from their left, so I kind of think of the math on that. So I do the kind of the logical step next. This is 300ths. Put it over 100. Percents are the number over 100, therefore it's just 53%. So not a lot of work to show. All right, so 0.3 as a fraction, that's in the tenth space. So 3/10. That's what it is as a fraction. Now, percents are something over 100. So this is how I think of this. If I have to change that 10 to 100, 10 times 10 is 100. So 30 times 10, 3 times 10 is 30. So this would be 30%. because the number is the amount over 100, not over 10. Okay? Think about it. 0.03 is 3%. 0.3 is 30%. Okay, so be careful with those. Oh, well, here's one. So this is 7/100ths, right? It's in that second decimal place, not the first one. So it's over 100. That means it's 7%. 0.6 as a percent, that's in the tenths place. Some people don't, it's not asking for a regular fraction, it's asking for a simplified fraction, but some people can look at 0.6 and go right to, that's 60%. Okay, but to get the fraction, that is in the tenths place. You have to remember that. So 6/10, but that's not reduced. You can divide that by 2. They're both even. That's the divisibility rule, is dividing numbers by, we're going to hit divisibility rule over and over again. So I just want to start somewhere. If a number is even, if the last digit of the number is even, the 0 and the 10 is even, the 6 is even, so they're divisible by 2. 6 divided by 2 is 3. 10 divided by 2 is 5. So there's a simplified fraction and a percent. All right, so 5.6 is a decimal. 5.6, so some people just take that decimal go and move it 2. So it'd be 0.056. That's what it would be as a decimal. That makes it easier to go to the fraction. That ends up in the thousandths place, and then that needs to be reduced. Let's see. 2 goes into them, 4 goes into them, 8 goes into them. So again, it doesn't matter how many steps you take. Do what you need to do to use your calculator. That's what your calculator is for. Try some numbers, get these numbers smaller, and make sure that they're as small as they can get when you reduce them. Reducing fractions just takes practice. We're going to hit it just about every section here. So bear with me on those. Just do what you can. I promise by the test we'll have practiced it a lot. All right. Let's see. 6.65 as a percent and a simplified fraction. Well, first I'm going to put it, well, I don't know. Again, 2 different ways to do it. Move the decimal that way. So this would be 64.5%. This is also in the thousandths place. Okay. Clearly that is divisible by at least 5. If I divide it by 5, put it in my calculator, try the 5, I get 129/200. Now those are still pretty big numbers, but they're not even 5, and they don't end in a 0, so 5 doesn't go in. So that's done. That's as small, believe it or not, as that gets. You can also try that over 1,000. That would help you get to the fraction, the percent, if you don't just move the decimal. Let's not go there. That's how I'd recommend to do that one. It's not the only way, but that's how I would recommend doing that one. All right, we've got 3/4 to write as a decimal. I would just do 3 divided by 4. If you put that in your calculator or do it by hand, don't forget, some people really have learned to do things by hand very well. Don't get me wrong. This is fine to do it this way. I just think it takes a long time. I'd rather stick it in my calculator and get 0.75. That's what it is as a decimal. So let's see, as a percent, move it 2 places, it would be 75%. And let's see, 3 divided by 8. 3 divided by 8, we saw that on the other thing, is 3.75. Put that in your calculator. 3 divided by 8 equals that. And then that would be 375 thousandths so some people think of it this way. Put it back over 100, so that means it's 30. That's what the percent is. Or they get it from here just by jumping 2 places. So however you want to do that. That's the decimal, that's the percent. All right, if we have 375%, 375% as a decimal, move it 2 places, that's 3. Remember, 100 is 1, 200 is 2. 300 is 3.75 as a decimal number and a mixed number. So 3 75 100ths. 3, reduce this by 5, reduce it by 25. We can reduce it by 25. Do 5 at a time, and then you'll get there. That's the mixed number. That's the decimal. All right, that's it for this one. There's another video for the other pages.